Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Hands on SAP Dev with me, DJ Q Macro. Episode 59, coming to you loud and clear on the one hand, over here on a sunny Manchester afternoon. And on the other hand, as you probably know, if you've been reading the blurb about this particular episode, we've got a super special guest, good friend and colleague, Kevin Muessig, who I'll introduce in a second. And he's going to basically take over the live stream and show us all sorts of cool stuff relating to basically a rather new release of the SAP iOS SDK 5.0, which, and I'll let Kevin explain this in a lot more detail, and he's going to show us some live coding as well. It allows us to build Catalyst apps. If you don't know what Catalyst apps are, then we'll find out as well. So yeah, we're live, we're ready. I've got Kevin waiting in the green room here on Lightstream. Ronnie, good afternoon to you. Nice to see you. We've got lots of people on board already, which is great. I'm going to switch over now to my guest screen, and yeah, I'm going to introduce Kevin very briefly, but I'm going to ask Kevin to also tell us a little bit about himself. So, Kevin Muessig, fellow developer advocate in the Apple space, iOS, and more. Welcome to Light. This is your first time on the live stream, right?
Correct. Hey, DJ.
Good morning to you. What time is it over there?
Good morning. It's like 8 a.m. Yeah.
8 a.m. On the San Francisco coast. Correct. That's awesome. And yeah, tell us a little bit more. Tell us where you are, what you do. A little bit about yourself. I think a lot of people will know you from TechEd if they've been to TechEd, but yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah, hi. I'm Kevin. I'm the iOS mobile advocate for SAP for like a little bit over 1.5 years now. I used to be a developer developing iOS apps for SAP and then transitioned into being an advocate. Doing a lot with Apple together over the last 1.5 years, a lot of workshops, teaching people iOS, talking about our SDK. And with the SDK version 5, now we got Mac Catalyst support, and that's pretty cool. So awesome. For those who don't know Mac Catalyst is a technology introduced by Apple in 2019 on WWDC in San Jose. Mm-hmm. And it basically lets you run your iPad-ready applications on Mac. That's what it basically does.
Right.
And there is a lot of technology behind that and how they do it. And there are great WWDC videos online where they explain that in detail. We're not going to talk about that in detail here, but we're going to see how to build up a project with the SDK and run it on Mac Catalyst.
Super. Okay. Yeah. I mean, in terms of, just explain to me as as someone ignorant of all things Apple. I mean, we have Mac OS, which was OS 10 before that, right? But there's also iOS. And is that iOS, is that valid for iPhones as well as iPads? And how does Catalyst fit into all that?
Yeah, so theoretically, there's iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. iPadOS, they introduced, and iPadOS is basically iOS with a little bit of an additional feature where you can do like iPad-specific things, right? But they're using, and that's what the key is all about. They're using the same UI framework. They're using UIKit, iOS and iPadOS. So macOS is using AppKit, right, as a UI framework. So what they did is all the underlying frameworks below the UI layer, they unified. So they run both on iOS as well as on macOS. So you can use all the databases, all the services, all of that kind of stuff you develop in your iOS application, you can use on macOS through Mac Catalyst as well. The only difference is that the UI layer is still different, but Catalyst allows you running UIKit components on Mac. And with that, you can basically just hit a checkbox in Xcode and run the app and it deploys a macOS application. And then you got to go in and think a little bit about how you can change your application from the UI to be a better fit on macOS. And through runtime conditions you can put in, you can switch code between Mac Catalyst and run on iOS.
Okay.
And I'm going to show that.
Perfect. Great explanation. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, so so what have we got? What are we looking at here? We're looking at the main topic page in the SAP developers.sap.com, right? For the SDK for iOS.
Correct. That would be your main entry point if you want to get started with the iOS SDK from SAP. You have like the details, a little bit of a description, a little bit of an introduction video, the components explained here, a little bit of architecture, and of course the tutorials, the community, and you can download it from there for free and use it with your trial account on Cloud Platform.
Free is good. Free is always good, right?
Free is always good.
Brilliant.
That's what you want, right? Yeah.
So what is it exactly you're going to be able to show us today? Because I'm really looking forward to seeing some Swift, seeing some development. You know, again, I'm not an Apple person, so I'm really interested to see, you know, or get a feel for what it's like to develop in this context.
So, of course, first of all, you need a Mac or some Mac OS device to develop iOS applications, Xcode. And what we're going or trying to go to build, if we have enough time, is basically what you see here. And let me know if that's big enough.
Yeah, that's good. So we've got an iPad version, a phone version, and a
correct. So what you see here is the result of a new mission I'm writing right now for the developers.sap.com website. So after this live stream, by end of the week, we should have that mission online, and then you can go in and pretty much build a more extended version of what I'm going to show you today by yourself. So what that is it's basically an app written for iPhone here. And because our components are scalable and also the operating system knows how to properly scale all the UI controls, we can run it on iPad. We see an iPad Pro 11-inch here, and Mac Catalyst, and you see the sidebar here, we see the screens in here. And to get that sidebar in, for example, it needs a little bit of work, but I'm going to show that later. And with like a little bit of code, you can basically build up those screens, run it on Mac, do a little changes here and there, and it all of a sudden looks like a Mac OS app.
That's beautiful. There's some sort of you know, device awareness going on there to say, okay, well, I'm now running on a Mac. And therefore, you know, I've got space to put a sidebar or something like that.
Correct. Let me just drag over my cheat screen if I'm stuck. And then
everybody has
that here. You gotta have that. You gotta have that. So let's open the application UI manager here. And in here, you can see we can say if my target environment is Mac Catalyst, please execute that code, and else execute other code. We could also do an else if and check on other environments, but usually we don't want to do it. So we just check on Mac Catalyst, execute that code, and otherwise execute other code. And that's how you go through and hook in Mac OS specific UI or other code you want to execute only on Mac Catalyst.
Nice.
Or not want to execute on Mac Catalyst, the other way around. So yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, I know I'm distracting you with all these questions. I'll just let you get. I'll shut up and let you get started.
No, it's fine. Questions are important. All right. So just really quick on how what I set up here. So we have mobile services running on SAP Cloud Platform, and I'm not going to show you how to enable mobile services. There are tutorials online how to do that. But in mobile services, I defined a mobile app configuration. And with that mobile app configuration, you pretty much describe what your mobile app looks like, what destinations it has, what kind of features it has. You can do logging and tracing in there. So we see here, for example, we see event logs happening from my mobile device and stuff like that. So it's a pretty cool service for you to maintain your mobile applications.
So just for those watching and maybe wondering, because we've got a lot of folks on the stream, which is great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody on the stream. Hi, Max, Jefferson, Tim, Vitali, Josh, Thomas. I've said hi to Ronnie as well. But and those are just people who've said something. But the word destinations here, it might be worth just spending 30 seconds on describing what that actually implies, what they are.
So the way I usually describe it, and you're more on the cloud side, so correct me if I'm wrong, is I usually describe it as some sort of almost like a reverse proxy. So your app talks to mobile services. Mobile services has this configuration where we can maintain multiple destinations pointing to a backend service, right? So your app basically talks to mobile service and says, okay, I want data from that backend service, and mobile services knows this destination, knows the URL where to go to, knows how the authentication works, and challenges the app in the end. So all your connection goes through mobile services here. And we can see that we have the mobile connectivity here, where you can drill in. And this takes a little bit to load. But we can see here, we have that EDM sample service 2, we have the service URL, and here you can define multiple mobile destinations your app should consume later on.
So basically, rather than maintain all this complex and secure configuration for remote data feeds, for example, and remote data APIs, it's managed centrally and securely so that your application effectively doesn't have to deal with that sort of stuff.
Correct.
Perfect.
Correct. And we're going to use the mobile sample of data, ESPM. That's a stable service, always available on Cloud Platform. And you can just add that to your application, and you have a backend you can develop against if you just want to try out certain things. And that service is mainly used in most of my tutorials as well. So we can see here we have customers with purchase orders and also those sorts of things. We can change the OData version. So we have it on version 2 right now. Yeah. And with that, you're pretty much ready to go. So let me just start up the assistant and talk a little bit about the assistant here. So if you download the SAP Cloud Platform SDK for iOS, it comes packaged into this application called SAP Cloud Platform SDK for iOS Assistant, right?
Okay.
And the assistant is a great native Mac application. You can add your mobile services account to it, and then pretty much connect to mobile services, fetch those application configurations we have up there, and create Xcode projects out of them.
So this is like the bridge between the two.
Correct. You could theoretically go in, create an Xcode project with Xcode itself, and implement all the code by yourself. But the assistant, when it generates the application, gives you all the authentication code. It gives you the onboarding code. It gives you a complete data service layer with models. So if you start a new project and you want to use this the SDK, and you have no data service, I would highly recommend using the assistant to generate the project.
Gotcha. Actually, talking of recommendations, Ronnie has just posted in the chat. He loves mobile services, and he also mentions the Open SAP course, Build Mobile Applications with SAP Cloud Platform Mobile Services, being a great course.
I've never done it myself, but I believe it's great because the product team is great. So it got to be good. But yeah, check that out. Mobile services is super powerful, and we probably need a separate live stream to just go into detail on what you can do with mobile services. So back to the SDK. The SDK basically is a set of native Swift frameworks, and that's really important to understand. It's not some proprietary SAP thing. It's really based on Swift. So if you're an iOS developer and you want to get started with the SDK, your learning curve is really not big. Because all the code is already what you know. The only thing you got to do is go into the documentation, check the APIs out, and that's pretty much it. And then start coding. So let's create a project.
Cool.
So we just say create new, and because we defined that mobile application configuration in mobile services, we can say reuse existing application, and we could theoretically create a new application here as well. And that also would create the app configuration of mobile services for us. But we took the other route. So we go in here, we select the account we want to see. And now it's fetching all the applications, and we have my
that's the one
sales assistant.
Yeah.
Sales assistant, right? We select the sales assistant here, and that's it on the cloud side. Now we're going in and adding the Xcode project. We're actually defining it. So our product name is sales assistant. Organization name SAP. Organization identifiers whatever. Here you can see Mac Catalyst, right, enabled, and that's what we want to check, right?
When you said it's just a checkbox, I thought, he's just making that up, but there it is. There's the checkbox, right?
There's the checkbox. That's the checkbox on the assistant side, which starts to generate certain project settings for you, so you don't have to do too much in Xcode itself.
Nice.
So we go in here, we ignore the proxy classes step. The proxy classes step basically, so the assistant uses a CLI in the background, right, generating those proxy classes out of the metadata document of your data service. Mm-hmm. So you can manipulate this the way it generates it here, but gotcha. I've never.
The morning group, the sunrise on the and sometimes getting back. Yes, Kevin can see the sound John and Kevin can see as well. I think it's still being me, right? Sound John. So hopefully I'm back. Back to being yes. Whether
Okay, I do have another mic here, so hopefully this should be okay. I'm not sure what happened with the other one, but I don't know whether my microphone going weird or was related to Kevin disappearing. I don't think so. But Kevin is still saying active on Slack. So I'm not sure. Give me a second. Let's just see if he's tried to email me at all. No, not there either. Hey, Michael, that's Michael. Can you let me know that is okay? Loud and clear on the headphones. Thank you very much. Okay, that's good then. But I think we've lost Kevin. Now, what I don't want to do is just ramble on just for the sake of it. Thank you, Napit. Thank you, Zatik. That's good. And thanks, Tim. And Murat, thanks for confirming. Does anyone have Kevin's number? Can we give him a call to see if his internet's down? And if it's down, what we will do is we will reschedule this. It's okay if we have to reschedule, unless we can think of something else to do. I've got the Raspberry Pis behind me. There's all sorts of stuff. I'm going to do some stuff on Friday as well. Let's just give Kevin one more minute. Let's just see if I can find Kevin's number. 1 second. I'm just going to go here. New message. Kevin Muessig. What's his... Oh, I've got a telephone number for him. Shall we call him live on the stream? There we go. How do we work this phone? +1. I'm not going to read his number out, don't worry. Right, let me give him a call. I've always wondered about these tones. Maybe somebody who knows about tones can figure out what the number was. This is quite interesting because Kevin, DJ, you disappeared from the stream about 5 minutes ago. Yes. Kevin, I'm just still speaking to the folks on the live stream here. Kevin didn't realize he'd disappeared. Do you want to connect back to the invite link is still valid? Okay, cool. We've got him back. Well, that's what I said to the folks on the stream, that I know you did say that the interwebs are a bit wonky in the morning. This is why we're doing it early for you. But have you managed to connect? I can't see you in the green room. Still saying joining. Okay. Oh, he's back. That was super exciting. Okay. Oh, he's put the phone down already. There we go. Hey, you're back. Welcome back. This is quality content, I know. So I'm going to switch back now to your to the guest link, and what I need to do is just make sure everything is okay. Yeah, there we go, and there we go, and we've got the app already developed. And thank you very much, and that's the end of the stream. So thank you for staying on. Yeah. Well, that was awesome. Yeah. Okay. But I mean, I'm glad we got you back. I mean, you from your perspective, you never disappeared, but we missed you, Kevin. We missed you. Anyway, so yeah, it was about 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. So just fill us in as to what you've done so far. No, tell us about that. Actually, sorry, 1 second. Apparently your audio is not coming through. So let me just add you again. Let me remove you and add you. Okay. Kevin's webcam. I'm going to delete the webcam and add it again. Not yet. Where are you? Where are you? Oh, I can see Kevin's microphone now. That's good. Oh, there we go. Look at this. Happening live right now and sent alive. Okay, yes, Murat. I didn't realize I was the only person who could hear him. But now, Kevin, say something now.
Hello, people.
Perfect. I think we're good. I think we're good.
All right.
Yes, Tom has just said that what you were saying was incredible, but you're going to have to repeat it. So there we go. So I've just asked you to tell us about the proxy classes.
Yeah. So the proxy classes, again, is pretty much a representation of your metadata document of your data service. So what they do is they parse the metadata document and create those proxy classes, we call them. So we have, for each entity, we have a class here, like address, customer, and so on. We can instantiate those classes and fill the objects with information, and then call create entity, which is a generic method on the data service. And the framework does everything for us. It uses it takes the entity, it encodes it, and then sends it back to the backend, and the backend creates this entity for you. The same for update, the same for delete. If we want to retrieve data sets, we can use the ESPN container, which is called with the sample service, and the name of that service is always the name of the service itself. So in this case, ESPN container. And in here, we have things like fetch purchase order items, which retrieves the complete purchase order items entity set. And we have the same for fetch product, fetch customer, and so on. And you always get two variants of those methods, a synchronized and an asynchronous method. So you can pick and choose whatever you want to use in your code. So the proxy classes actually, if you have no data backend, save you most of the time. Like usually we say it's like the model layer in an application, in a mobile application, is like a third of your development time.
Yes.
So you can save that time completely and focus on user experience, which is super important to us as SAP, as well as for Apple, because Apple helped us build this SDK, right?
Yeah.
So that's basically the proxy classes. Going back to the application, this is what we get. We get a basic list with all the entity sets, and we can drill in, and it's loading those entity sets, and we can display them, we can edit them, or create new ones. It's just really, really nice to demo, really, really nice to play around with the data service itself. But enough talk. Let's code a little bit.
Let's code.
So let's code it. Let's make this app our own. So we have the main storyboard here, and the storyboard defines the app flow and the UI of our application. So right now we have a split view controller in here, and we don't want that right now. So we just take the whole thing and just get rid of it. So next, what we really want to do is we want to develop that overview, right? So if we open up this image again real quick. Anyway, where's my image? Anyway, you saw this overview, right? So we're going to develop that. That's a table view controller. So we're looking for table view controller, and we just double click, and we have that in our storyboard. And that's a UI representation of that table view controller. To actually implement code for that, we have to create a Cocoa Touch class for it. So we can say, use the project navigator, say new file, select Cocoa Touch class. We're going to make sure that the language is in Swift. Sometimes if you open up Xcode the first time, this is on Objective-C, but we want to have Swift. So we want to make sure we subclass of UI table view controller, and then we just give it a name. Just call it overview table view controller. We say next and create. And we got table view controller with some method stubs in there.
So this has just been generated for us just now from that wizard.
From that Xcode project navigator through the So what we got to do is we back that visual representation of our table view controller. We back that up with our custom class overview controller. So what we did now is we connected that UI with the code. That's important to understand. So you also see here on the left-hand side, it changed to overview table view controller scene. And it contains a table view with a table view cell. Now what we got to do is, I know I want to have navigation in there. And probably out of time reasons, we're not going to implement any navigation. But we want to have navigation in there. So what you usually do is you embed that guy into a navigation controller. So a navigation controller helps you handle your whole navigation stack. So you don't have to keep track on your navigation stack yourself. You can just use the navigation controller and push views on that navigation controller. So
Does the navigation controller have a physical UI representation, or is it more of a logical thing?
It's a logical thing. The only thing you see is the navbar. So you get a navbar out of the box. But that's pretty much it. It handles everything under the hood for you.
Gotcha.
So the next step would be to tell the system what is our initial view it should display, right? And for that, we can say here with the navigation controller opening the attributes inspector, we can say is initial view controller, and you can see this arrow appear here. Yeah. And that means if I instantiate that storyboard, this would be the first view which I can instantiate, or which I can instantiate every view, but this is the first one for the system to know this is the first view controller. So what we do now is we open the application UI manager. And the application UI manager is a generated class by the assistant handling your UI flow from onboarding bis after onboarding, right? So we have a thing called show application screen here, and that's right now is instantiating that split view controller. And that's not what we want, right? So what we do here is we just get rid of that, and and we just say let main navigation controller equals actually let's reuse some code. It's faster. Nice. So we get rid of that. We call that, and we have a refactor now in Xcode, and that's pretty cool. So we can call that main navigation controller. Let's just return. And we want to have it from the main, but instead of instantiating view controller with an identifier like they did before, we just say instantiate initial view controller, and we force cast that to a UI navigation controller, and we get rid of that stuff, and that's pretty much it.
So I'm seeing here on line 83 that the actual storyboard that we saw before, that's actually a fundamental part of what you're developing with from a code perspective, as well as it's not just a design time, it's also used at runtime, right?
Absolutely. Correct. You can do a lot in storyboard. For example, I like to do a lot of table view things in code. But I know people who design complete screens in storyboard. You can go into the table view. You can say, I want to have multiple prototype cells. You can add different kind of cells in here. You can change not the behavior really, but you can add all sorts of things in the storyboard. And that's really not design time only. Like, this is really important for runtime. Yeah. That's the reason why in the application UI manager, we can instantiate the main storyboard and say, give me please instantiate the initial view controller. Or like we saw before, we can instantiate every view controller in there as long as it has a storyboard ID. So that's really, really helpful.
Wow, yeah.
And then we basically just set this navigation controller on a view controller. And before I'm going to start that, because I was talking about storyboard IDs, we just go back here, and here we can set storyboard IDs. And this is going to be important later on because we want to instantiate that view controller directly. So we just hit return here, and usually do restoration ID as well. This is for screen restoration, which every developer should implement, please. That's important because if you switch between apps, you always want your users to get back to the screen he left your app in. So please take care of the restoration ID and implement the needed app delegate methods. But if we run the app now, we should see an empty overview controller, like an empty table view.
So that's really nice already. I mean, the fact that you've spent what 5 minutes, 10 minutes max writing some code and designing stuff, and already you can hit run and see what the results are.
Correct. And here we see our empty table view. It doesn't have data. It doesn't have a title or anything. So yeah, we have some results pretty fast.
Nice.
So let's go go in and develop a little bit of stuff, a little something here. I like to use code snippets when I do things like that, because it saves a little bit of time. So what we do here is we just use the import statement code snippet, and what it does is it just imports all the SAP frameworks we need.
Gotcha.
SAP Fiori as our UI layer, Common containing the Logger framework, Foundation we need for all sorts of things. It's like all the plumbing and stuff in there, SAP OData for the backend connection, and SAP Fiori flows. So the next step, right? The next step would be to actually go in and add some class properties. This we can do simply like that. So what we're gonna do is we load some products and we load some customers. That's the reason why we have two arrays here, which will hold the product and the customers. Also, for the products, we're going to lazy load some images, right? So we want to have a simple image cache, which right here is a dictionary. And the string is going to be the URL, and UI image is going to be the image. And of course, an array containing the product image URLs.
Can I ask a stupid question? What I'm guessing is the type that's defined in line 18, product with a capital P. Where are we getting
class? That's the proxy class. So we see here, right, product, and if we jump to definition, it jumps to the proxy class. So even if we retrieve data from the backend, it's strongly typed, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be typed to product, or it's going to be typed to customer. So the next step would actually be going in and implement the logger, because we want to be good citizens and have a logger ready.
Of course.
So we just say let logger, and then we just say logger.shared, and then we just called it overview view controller. And we have a shared instance of the logger, and the assistant generates the code for the logger instantiation in that delegate. And it's a central instance, so we can access it like that. And we give it a name. So our log message actually say overview controller : whatever message you send. So that's quite helpful. The default log level would be debug. So we instantiated the logger here, and now we actually want to do another thing before we go into the data loading part. The assistant generates a utils protocol called SAP Fiori loading indicator, and that protocol basically defines an SAP Fiori loading indicator, right? The UI class, and it allows you to easily show and hide those loading indicators without implementing too much code. So we're just going to inherit from SAP Fiori loading indicator. We get this loading indicator property here, and with that we can later on show and hide loading indicators. So the next part would be, and that might look a little bit funny, but we gotta get an instance of the data service, and the data service is basically an instance on the onboarding session. So what we do here is, and because the SDK now supports multiple destinations, they have a thing called the file configuration provider, and in there we have app parameters, and from there we can retrieve destinations, right? And those destinations we can use to go into the OData controller, which is part of the onboarding session, because it's important to know that you have to have a valid onboarding session to actually have access to the data service. And then we can use that to retrieve our sample service, right?
That name there, the string name, that's I know that's the reference to our data service there, but what exactly is that? Is that referring to the name inside of this this whole bundle of stuff that's been generated for us? So
basically, this is the identifier for our destination, right?
Right. Okay, that's the destination.
Right, and it holds a dictionary inside in the OData controller, and with that destination name, you can retrieve the data service for that destination. And the only thing you got to do is handle some errors here. in that case, we show an alert dialog telling them, oh, your data service is not reachable. Usually you would not tell the user your data service is not reachable because nobody would know what a data service is.
Yeah.
But in that case, we just put that in here. And other than that, we just return data service. And that's interesting because if you don't know Swift, this is not a method, this is computed property. So this is basically a class property with a block, right, with a closure. And in there, we execute that code and return that data service back.
Nice.
Or nil in case of we get an error. So we actually have our data service now. So what we can do is actually implement our load data.
This is where it starts to get exciting.
So we have our load data here. And I'm just going to open my cheat sheet over here so I don't forget anything. But basically what we're going to do in here is, first of all, as soon as this method gets called, we want to show a loading indicator because we're starting loading our data. So because we conform to the protocol, we can just say show Fiori loading indicator, and that's all we got to do. Yep, and that's going to show a loading indicator centralized in our screen. Next, what we got to do is we create a dispatch group. And that's interesting because what we want to do is we want to fetch customers and products on the same time. Actually, we want to fetch them serialized, but we want to react to the result first when both of the requests come back. So we're using a dispatch group.
Yeah, like a promise all in JavaScript. So I want to set off this asynchronous task A, asynchronous task B, and when both of them have completed, then.
Correct. So what the documentation says, a group of tasks that you monitor is a single unit.
Nice.
So that's basically what you do here. And then what we do is we call a fetch customers. We pass in the group. And we call a fetch products. And we pass in the group. And what we do next is we say group.notify, right? And that method gets called as soon as both of those fetch requests come back, right? And then group notify gets called, and I can execute more code here. And we actually dispatch the whole thing back to the main thread, right? And we get rid of that. And then we open the block, and then we start saying self hide Fiori loading indicator because data loading is done, or we got some arrows. And then we want to say self table view, dot reload data. Reload data is what the name of the method does, right? It starts reloading its data source and re-rendering the new data it got. So we got to call that in here.
Yep.
Next, we want to implement the fetch customers. So we say private func fetch customers, and we get a group in here. And we start the method here. So the fetch customers is pretty easy. We say, okay, we entered the group, right?
Yep.
So it's our turn now, the fetch customers' turn now to retrieve some information. And then we define the data query. And data query is an SAP OData object. And the data query pretty much allows us to perform typical data tasks, right? Like filter, or in our case here, an expand.
So if you can do it on if it's a normal OData query, for example, with query parameters, you can do it here.
Correct. So you can say we want to expand our fetch customers to also retrieve the sales orders for each customer, right? Because sales orders is a separate entity. So we defined that query, and the only thing we really got to do is we have our data service, and here we say fetch customers, right? Matching our query, and then we just go in here. We hold ourselves a weak reference to self, and that's important because we're in a block. So theoretically, it could happen that we navigate out of that screen, right? And self is not available anymore. That's the reason why we have a weak reference on it.
Right.
And then we handle our errors. So we can get an error back. So we save unwrap it. And then in case of an error, we say alert helper, which is also generated class by the assistant. Display me an alert with a string called, I don't know, let's say can't retrieve customers.
Yep.
And we don't need a comment here. And then we just pass in the error. And we want to show that on self. And of course, we got to leave the group in any case. So if we have an error, which we still want to leave the disbridge group and return out of that block.
Okay.
In case we have customers, right? We want to do a little bit of magic here. And DJ, please let me know if we ran out of time, because this
no, don't worry. We've got 15 minutes left. Don't worry. I'll give you a shout. But in fact, I was just wondering if I've got time to ask you a question, if that's okay, which is the fetch customers call on line 67 there. Is that also part of the generated proxy that we were talking about before? Correct. Right. So
again, if we just jump to the definition, we see we have a ESPN container fetch customers, synchronous and asynchronous call here.
So that's like a generic retrieval, like a generic query function without any adornment of query parameters. But here you're adding a query parameter to say, okay, I want to expound on the.
Correct. It just helps the framework to construct the request properly,
yeah.
Right? The get request.
Because at the end of the day, what happen over the wire is an actual low data query operation, isn't it?
Correct. That's what's going to happen. So we retrieve the result here, and we do some magic on it. We just say we want to have it sorted by the sales order count, right? So the customer with the highest sales order count is going to be the first in our list, and we append that to our customer list, and then we leave the group. And with that, we actually have done our fetch customers. That's all we got to do.
Nice.
And because we only have 15 minutes left and you want to see some Mac Catalyst, I'm going to be a little bit faster here. So next we want to fetch some products. So the same thing, we enter the group, we call fetch product. In that case, we don't need a data query. We handle our errors, we leave the group in case of an error happening. We append our products to the list. And in this case, we also want to retrieve the product image URLs. So what we do is we take the result array and we call map on it and say, please give me the picture URLs. And if there is no picture URL, just put in an empty string. And then we leave the group.
Nice. 50 points there for the use of map. That's very nice.
Yep, I love those operators. And I know you do too. So the last piece here for retrieving information from the backend is load image from. So we load image from a URL. We have a completion handler here with an escaping closure, which retrieves an image. And in here, we need our app delegate. And with the app delegate, you get access to the session manager, to the onboarding session, to the existing SAP URL session. So SAP URL session is basically a child object of the URL session, and URL session is an Apple API you can use to create data tasks. And data tasks we can use to fetch images. So we actually open a data task on that SAP URL session. We handle some errors here. And then we say, if we get an image back, we set this image, we put this image into our image cache using the URL absolute string, and we dispatch back on the main queue, right? Executing the completion handler, passing in that image, and then we resume the data task. That's all we got to do here. And with that, we have all the methods in place to actually retrieve all the data we need.
Beautiful.
The only thing we got to do is we got to populate the UI now. So let's just implement those data source methods. So table view has a data source and a delegate, and you got to conform to the data source and to the data source at least to provide information to that table view. Because we use the table view controller, we get those method stubs out of the box. We don't have to write an extension, or we don't have to declare it up here. Usually you will have to put in UI table view controller data source. But because we're inheriting from UI table view controller, it's all packaged in. So what you got to do is the number of sections in our case is 4. And I'm going to explain to you a little bit later why that is. And the number of rows in section is the place where I'm going to explain that. So let's see. What we want to do is, you remember, right? The UI had those gray dividers in between, and it had those see all in there and so on. So those dividers are actually sections with just basically like a gray background. So what we do here is we can switch over to section in the number of rows in section and say, if we're in the first section and the products count is bigger than 3, we return 3 because we only want to show 3 products. For the customers, which is in the third section, we want to check if there's at least 1 customer there. If yes, we return 1. Not because we only show 1 customer, but we're going to show a so-called FUI collection view table view cell. So we're using a collection view inside of a table view cell. And you will see that a little bit later. And by default, we just return 0. So we got that in place. The next part we got to do is we want to implement those section headers, right? And we have 2 override methods we can use for that. One would be and I'm sorry that I'm not coding all of that, but we want to get places.
Well, yeah, no, it's also super impressive that this code suddenly appears. I mean, your keyboard skills are legendary. But yeah, also just to let you know, we've got 9 minutes left.
That's why I'm doing it. So we're having the view for header in section. The view for header in section is basically you return a view to display as a header in a section. So we dequeue an FUI table view header footer view. That reminds we have to actually register those in a second with a reuse identifier and cast that to an FUI table view header footer view. And then again in a section we distinguish those sections. In case 1, we just show simply products here. And in case 3, where the customer comes in place, we actually have the attribute style in here, which allows us to put a title label in and an attribute label, right? And here we say, this is our high-profile customers, but if you want to see all the customers, there are so-and-so many available here. It also has a did select handler where we could perform the navigation later on. And per default, like in all the other cases, we show the divider must view, right? So let's just implement those, register those cells real quick. So in the view did load, and this is, as it says, this gets called as soon as the view did load into memory.
Yeah. So
we actually call, we can call a lot of setup stuff in here. So first of all, we change the navigation item title to overview. Then we register an FUI object table view cell, an FUI collection view table view cell, an FUI table view header footer view. Those are the UI controls we're going to need. We also tell the table view that its estimate row height is 180, and this row height should be automatic dimension. This is just some parameters helping the table view to understand what your content is all about and how big you want to have it, right? So it can make the calculation better on how to render your cells. So with that, we can just go in and implement the other, the header. Did I just actually? Oh, the header, the footer, right?
Yeah.
The footer view. So let's go in and implement that view for header in section.
Okay.
View for footer in section, and it's pretty much the same thing, right? Again, in the section 1, we get our table view, header footer view, and this time this one is an attributed style, and we do the same thing. We just say see all, and show the products count here. And the other way, we just show an empty UI view, right? And now the interesting part comes. We're actually going to display some data, and don't get shocked, but this is a huge code block. So cell for row add is there for you to dequeue those registered cells and populate it with information. Okay. We again go over the section, right? And then we say please give me the correct product, DQ the product cell, and then we just pretty much fill that product cell properties with information, right? We just say, give it the product name, category name, give it information about the stock details. We do a little bit of condition here where we say if the stock details are 0, then you can say out of stock. In other case, you can say in stock. Then we show a placeholder image at the beginning. We access the base URL, and you can find that URL, and I showed that before in mobile services. So you have the base URL here. And then we have the product image URLs, and we just append that to our base URL, right? And then we got to make sure that URL is valid. If not, we just return the product cell as is with the placeholder image. In other case, we check the image cache if that image is already there. If yes, we set it as detail image. If not, we call load image from, put in our unwrapped URL, and then set the image. That's all we got to do.
Nice.
And then a little bit of description test, and we return the product cell here. Next, we DQ the FUI collection view table view cell. And we got to set ourselves as a delegate and a data source in here. We set some layout parameters and some other parameters here to make sure that everything gets rendered the correct way. And we register on that collection view, we register an FUI item collection view cell, which is going to be the cell inside of the collection view, and then return the whole thing here. And you see we have compile time errors right now because we were not conforming to the delegate and data source here. So what we got to do is, and I like that, I like the extension pattern in Swift. We can write class extensions here to extend our classes with those protocols, right?
Nicely done.
So UI collection view delegate we're not doing right now. So we're just taking care of the data source. And the data source for the UI collection view is pretty much just almost the same as for the table view. We have a number of items in section where we say customers count. And then we have a cell for item app, which is kind of like the cell for row add. And then we do the same thing. We get a customer, we DQ the FUI item collection view cell, we set some information, we use a date formatter to format the date of birth, and that's it. That's all we got to do.
Wow.
And now, yep, if we run that now, and then I'm going to show you Catalyst, I'm not going to show you the other screens. But if you want to see how to implement the other screens and navigation and all sorts of things, just wait for that mission to come out by end of the week.
When do we expect to see that mission? Is it in the next few weeks?
Oh no, it's done. It's currently in review.
Okay.
It's all right. So as soon as it's for review, it should work. And we see our sections here. Oh, I know what I forgot. Of course, we gotta call load data, right? Because if we don't trigger load data, we're not going to get some data.
You did that deliberately, didn't you?
Sure, I want to show off. So let's see.
That build is really fast too.
Yeah, they improved the build for Xcode over the last few years, like drastically. So this is really nice. So yeah, we have a view. We have some placeholder images here. Maybe
so these are the sections as well that we were looking at, right?
Correct. Those are the sections here as well. And just to make the view complete, we're just going to implement the Kpi header real quick. And the Kpi header is a nice control used to display KPIs on top of a table view, right?
Right. Yep.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit again here. I'm so sorry that I do that so much. But we call a setup Kpi header. And this just instantiates a Kpi header and adds KPI items to it, right? And then adds this whole thing to the table header view of the table view, and that's pretty much it. So what we got to do is we got to just put in this private KPI header. It's an FUI KPI header, and now this guy should be happy. Or actually, we can actually do that because we make sure if you don't know optionals, we just force unwrap that up here because we make sure it's
cast.
It's not really a cast. We can talk about the optional pattern in a different live stream, but it's basically you don't have to do nil checks anymore. So the compiler makes sure that it complains if
Yeah.
you're not handling those optionals correctly.
Gotcha.
And then of course,
no pressure, but we're at 59 minutes past. But I mean, I think we can extend for a few minutes, right?
Yeah.
Right.
If you give me a little bit longer, we can run that guy
Yeah.
on Mac, and I'm just going to show you a couple of things on what you can do on Mac. So we run that now. We should actually have a Kpi header. We should see data coming in. Don't ask me why the images are not loading. Probably I just missed something somewhere. But that's basically what our screen is, right? And we can run that on iPad, and it's going to be scaled properly and all of that. In the mission, you're going to implement those see all navigations as well as the customer and product list. And you do a lot of changes to it with the split view controller and things like that. But this is going to kill our time here. But if we go in here to our sales assistant, and this is what the assistant, the iOS assistant actually did. It checked this Mac here, and you see it requires macOS 10.15 at least. And you can also see it modifies your bundle identifier, and the bundle identifier is there to identify your app in the App Store. So the bundle identifier gets a prefix Mac Catalyst, right? So that's how you know there's a Mac Catalyst version of that whole thing. And then the only thing we got to do is in signing and capabilities, we got to add my development account here, and we add my signing certificate development, and that's all we got to do. And this thing, this thing will run on Mac. This is all we got to do.
You were really teasing me there, because all that development for this, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, in another 30 seconds, it just runs on Mac.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And literally what you got to do is you just got to go in and say, if on Mac Catalyst environment, execute that code, else execute that code. That's all you got to do. And then you can manipulate UI, you can manipulate features, functionality, everything, right? The only thing Apple asks you to do is consider if your iPad app or your iPad-ready app is actually suitable for Mac, right? If you have like an iPad app using ARKit, don't bring it to Mac, because there is no ARKit on Mac, right? No, exactly. Or if you have a mobile-only use case, don't bring it on Mac. There's no reason for that. Other way, if you have an existing Mac OS application already out there, which is well maintained, there's no reason to bring your iPad app to Mac, because you already have a Mac OS application which is maintained. Just for the sake of having one code line, it's always better to go write directly on Mac OS, right? But if you have an iPad app out there and you want to bring it to Mac, this is the way to do it. And you can see this is a Mac app, and out of the box we get the minimize button, we get the cancel button, we get all resizing of views. All of that is out of the box. We get scrolling, interaction, everything.
That's amazing. I'm super impressed with that. And we also get the authentication via Cloud Foundry, OAuth, which we talked about on last week's live stream as well. That's fantastic.
Everything out of the box. You see this whole app flow is completely the same. We have the data privacy, and we have our app. We have our app, right? And of course, it would be nice to have a sidebar on the side. It would be nice to have some menu bars up there, or get rid of some menu bars, because we get a menu bar out of the box. For example, you can remove the format, you can add menu items here, you can add preferences, and that's what I'm going to show you for the last thing, and then I'm done, DJ, promise. But this is super cool. So the way you can handle settings in iOS or in general in Xcode, you can just create a new file, and you call that guy, you search for settings bundle, and you just say next, and you just create that settings bundle. And in that settings bundle, you can actually define settings here, right? So for example, let's change the title here and say hello DJ. And then we just redeploy that on our Mac. And then all of a sudden we have a preferences menu, because the runtime automatically recognizes that settings bundle, and you get a preferences menu out of the box on Mac.
Whoa.
So in here we have all of a sudden preferences, and we can click on it, and it's horrible and it's really ugly.
Yeah, but I mean, you did that within 2 key presses.
Correct. And you can make that nice now, right? You can like change the appearance of that window a little bit. Exactly. But we literally just created a file, and that's it.
Kevin, that was awesome. That was awesome. I'm definitely going to have to get you back to do a little bit more of a deep dive continuation, but we've run out of time. So thank you so much for showing us. That was perfectly, beautifully timed as well. Nice use of the snippets. And I'd like to end on the preferences with my name in there, so fame at last. Kevin, thanks so much for joining, and thank you everybody for joining as well. We've got lots of folks on the live stream, and you can also obviously rewatch this in the recording. Have a great day, Kevin, and I'll see you online.
Perfect.
Thanks.